Renewable energies are also the oldest sources of energy. If we take into consideration, for example, the power of the wind, it has been used since the second millennium before Christ for navigation. Another renewable energy source from the past is the power of water. The first water mills appeared in Anatolia, and also the combustion of wood was the first source of thermal energy, which was used to heat the houses or to cook food. Then, with the first industrial revolution, which begins in 1765 when Watt creates the first steam engine, coal was introduced. It is a raw material that heavily pollutes the environment. And after the steam engine, other machines were invented and new sources of energy were discovered. The discovery of new sources of energy led to the second industrial revolution, which dealt with electricity and oil. It started roughly around 1870 until the first half of the 20th century. Energies are divided into renewable and non-renewable energies. Hard coal, oil, natural gas are not renewable because they take very long geological periods to form, while consumption is very fast. On the other hand, hydroelectric energy, wood, biomass like vegetable waste and animal slurry deriving from livestock farming, and of course alternative sources like wind, sun and tides are renewable. All countries, with the exception of the desertic ones and therefore without water, have hydroelectric power plants. In developed countries, there is no more the possibility of increasing hydroelectric energy because developed countries have already exploited all they could, and all their falling waters have been channeled into penstocks. On the other hand, in developing countries, there is still a great potential to be used in order to increase hydroelectric energy, but this requires great investments, and many times developing countries can't afford that. One of the most important hydroelectric dams in the world was completed in 2011 with an installed capacity of 2,400 MW and a water collection reservoir of 700 km squared. It is the Bakun Dam in the Sarawak region of Malaysia. There is a complex energy transmission system with cables that cross the Sarawak by land for 670 kilometers. The project was entrusted to a Malaysian private company, Ekran, which sells energy to Tenaga, which is a company comparable to our Enel. But according to some, the Bakun project hides other interests to allow Ekran, the company, to exploit the 700 kilometers of jungle necessary for the construction of the reservoir. The initial project was created to allow Malaysia to increase its energy capacity in order to support the strong industrial economic development expected for the following years. For the realization of this project, the Sarawak region, which was rich in water and covered by a tropical jungle, has been totally transformed. Indeed, nowadays, the main feature of the Sarawak region is no more the nature, but this giant hydroelectric dam which links the region of Borneo to the peninsula. But not all renewable energy sources are really renewable. If we take into consideration tropical forest wood, it is consumed at great speed, so it is not truly renewable. Tropical deforestation, which is a very serious phenomenon for the environmental health of our planet, is not only due to the action of large companies that exploit the forests, but it is also due to the use of food as a fuel made by poor population in order to increase the spaces for agriculture and livestock. On the other hand, nuclear energy, while deriving from uranium, which is not renewable in nature, can be considered partially renewable with enrichment technologies that can make atomic shells last a very long time. Kuwait, which is a very small semi-desertic state, is the symbol of one of today's major energy sources, oil, which Middle Eastern countries extract in abundance. Some oil wells, however, were set on fire during the 1991 occupation by Iraq and the subsequent Gulf War. These gigantic fires and the loss of crude oil have worsened environmental conditions. It took many months to put out the fires, but the emission of enormous quantities of CO2 into the atmosphere was irreparable. Among the countries that have invested the most in renewable energy in these 10 years, China is the first, with $758 billion between 2010 and the first half of 2019. The United States is in second place, with $356 billion. Japan in third place with $2,000 billion. In the Arabian Peninsula, we have to mention Dubai, which recently launched the Dubai Clean Energy Strategy 2050. The goal is very ambitious. By 2050, renewable energies should guarantee about 70% of the Emirates' energy needs. Israel, which after having focused almost on natural gas for a long time, has decided to diversify. The tallest solar tower in the world is in Israel indeed, in the Negev desert. The COVID-19 virus slows down energy consumption and the economy overall. Exception to this situation is represented by renewable energy, as reported by the International Energy Agency. There is a record in 2020 with 200,000 megawatts of new plants, and it will also be a record in 2021. Renewable energies account for almost 90% of the increase in total power capacity worldwide in 2020, and next year they will reach the fastest growth in the past 6 years. So some sectors are running like solar, wind and hydroelectric, and others are slowing down, such as biofuels and the industrial use of bioenergy. Renewable energies are resilient to the COVID crisis, but not to political uncertainties, it is said by Faith Birol, Executive Director of the International Energy Agency. If the proposed ecological electricity policies of the upcoming Biden administrations are implemented, the United States could have a much faster development of photovoltaic and wind energy, contributing to the faster decarbonization of the energy sector. The word sustainability was introduced during the first United Nations Conference on the Environment in 1972 and was then codified in 1887 with the publication of the so-called Brundtland Report. Before the era of globalization, there were two traditional environmental concerns: the conservation of natural resources and the damage caused by pollution. Neither pollution nor wildlife respect international boundaries, and action to mitigate or conserve sometimes had to involve more than one state. There were also some attempts to regulate exploitation of maritime resources. And before the Brundtland Commission and the Brundtland Report, the environment had been edged off the international agenda by the global economic downturn of the 1970s and then by the onset of the Second Cold War. It was only on April 22, 1970, in the United States that 20 million environmentalists mobilized to raise awareness on the need to protect natural resources, and consequently was born the first World Earth Day, later ratified by the United Nations. 50 years have passed since the United Nations have ratified the first World Earth Day, and 50 years later, now the Earth Day involves 193 countries around the world, and through the Earth Day network we are able to raise awareness in order to find new solutions to the question how can we contribute to environmental sustainability and reduce the impact of our lifestyle on the planet. Today the answer is a development model capable of maintaining the balance between respect for the environment and socio-economic progress through long-term strategies, such as recognize the value of environmental resources, protect the biodiversity of species and the ecological dimension, protect the health of productive ecosystem, such as agricultural land and livestock, making them sustainable, promote the energy transition by using renewable energy sources, design products, goods and services through a design based on attention to the environmental with eco-design, and mitigate the effects of climate change. According to the analysis of the Yale and Columbia University in 2020, Italy ranks as 20th in the world ranking of the Environmental Sustainability Index. This ranking shows that European countries are among the most virtuous in improving air quality, protecting ecosystems, and managing water and natural resources. The index is processed through the analysis of 32 indicators, and it is used to classify 180 countries in the world based on the state of health of the environment and the vitality of their ecosystems. The analysis takes into consideration the quality of air and drinking water, waste management, but also emissions of pollutants and greenhouse gases, and the degree of protection of habitats and biodiversity. Here we can see the results of the EPI, the Environmental Performance Index, and as we can see, in the first place there's Denmark, which in the last 10 years has increased its score by 7.3 points, followed by Luxembourg and Switzerland. Down from the step of the podium there are the United Kingdom, France and Austria, followed by Finland, Sweden and Norway. Germany is 10th, and the first non-European countries in the ranking are Japan, which is the 12th, and Australia in the 13th place. The Global Agenda defines 17 Sustainable Development Goals to be achieved by 2030, divided into 169 targets. There were other attempts in order to include for the first time the idea of sustainable development. The first attempt was in 1992, when there was the largest international conference ever held, the UNCED, which is the UN Conference on Environment and Development. It raised the profile of the environment as an international issue. Then, on UNCED 10th anniversary in 2002, the World Summit on Sustainable Development met at Johannesburg. As we can see, it was not called anymore as UN Conference on Environment and Development, but it was called World Summit on Sustainable Development. The change of wording indicated how conceptions of environment and development had shifted since the 1970s. Now discussion was embedded in recognition of the importance of globalization and of the dire state of the African continent. The eradication of poverty was clearly emphasized, along with practical progress in providing clean water, sanitation, and agricultural improvements. While these UN conferences marked the stages by which the environment entered the international political mainstream, they also reflected underlying changes in the scope and perception of environmental problems. But then it is only with this agenda, the 2030 agenda, that we have the consideration of a new aspect. For the first time, the agenda is determined to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resources and taking action on climate change.